Okay, welcome everyone to our first session of the day. My name is Kristina. I am your host for this session, and we will start with a presentation from Martin Smrek. Martin is a CEO of Humánny pokrok. He wrote his dissertation about helping marginalized groups to overcome the systems of their oppression, and later he realized that the most oppressed group of today are farmed animals, and founded the biggest farmed animal advocacy group in Slovakia, Humánny pokrok, which he still leads. He hates small talk, loves pizza, and brews his own beer. In his talk today, Martin will focus on how to be more inclusive in animal advocacy organizations, how to choose a language reflecting human diversity, and how to ensure we are creating a safe space for everyone. Before I hand over to Martin, then a reminder for all our attendees, please write your questions to Martin in the live questions tab, and we will read these out in the end of the talk. And Martin will also be here for a networking session after the talk, for which we will post a link in the chat in the end. Okay, great. So now with great pleasure, I hand over to you, Martin. The floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Give me a second. And we can go. So not everyone not everyone has the same starting line in life. Me, for example, I was born as a white heterosexual man in a relatively rich and stable country. I was born without any major health issues and without any disabilities. One could say that the world is my oyster, which means that I have essentially all the opportunities at hand. And if I decide to follow any of those, I don't have to overcome that many obstacles in order to do that. So if I decide to fight for the animals, it's rather easy for me. But things could be very different if I was born into a different body or in a different place. Imagine a woman born in a country which constantly reminds her that her place is in the kitchen and that she should not follow her career goals. Imagine a gay man in the small town in Poland which wants to be LGBT-free, and it reminds him constantly that the city would be rather happy if he did not exist. Imagine a person born with a disability who moves around in a wheelchair in a city that was designed for healthy people with no disabilities and is not wheelchair accessible. Or imagine a Roma woman living in a shanty town in a marginalized community in the eastern part of Slovakia. What these people have in common is that they have to work much harder in order to get to the same starting line as a white heterosexual man like me. They have to overcome obstacles which are remnants of the design of the white heterosexual man who used to be for centuries at the center of the society, who was designing the laws, designing the rules, setting up the norms, and also influencing the culture. And even though we are far from the worst times of this era, and the most harsh kinds of discrimination are already illegal, the design of the society made by a white heterosexual man for a white heterosexual man is still here, and it still makes it harder for every other social group to succeed in life and to fully participate in society. And you might be asking, why should we care about this? As animal advocates, it is not our responsibility to solve all the social issues. Nevertheless, despite the fact that we might care very deeply personally for these issues, but as animal advocates, we are responsible for making our movement as inclusive as possible, and making it as strong and as resilient as possible, and making it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to join the fight for the animals. And if there are some obstacles we can remove, I think we should do that without any hesitation. What we need to do is to get the best out of the best people. We need to be able to reach to all the talent pools that are out there, to find the best people, get them on board into our movement, and create an environment in which they can fully focus on fighting for the animals instead of focusing on overcoming unnecessary obstacles. In the next step, we need to be able to build wide coalitions, because as data shows us, the most successful social movements of the past 100 years were the ones that were capable of building wide and diverse coalitions with very different social groups. And in order to do that, we need to become inclusive and diverse ourselves. in order to learn to listen to different perspectives of different social groups, to integrate them into the design of our movement and organizations, and to become able to relate to different social groups and build strong alliances with them. And finally, we need to repeat the same thing on the global level with new global challenges, in which if we fail and if we make a lot of unnecessary mistakes, we can do a lot of unnecessary damage and slow down our progress in the end. So where should we begin? The first step is to set up your language and set up the expectation of other people from your organization. Language has a lot of power, and the way we use language and the words we choose to describe the reality around us defines the reality around us itself. And it also defines how we relate to that reality, and it defines this for all the other people who listen to us. A good example of this is how we use language to describe animals we work for. We are not using the term farm animals because farm animals means animals that belong to the farm. We used a different term, farmed animals, animals that were taken from somewhere and put into the farm. And the same logic is behind not calling people disabled, because that defines the people as disabled, but calling them people with disabilities, people who were inflicted with disability at some point in their life. We also tried to make our language as inclusive as possible, because as you probably know, in general, people don't like to be left behind and they don't like to be made invisible. And a nice example how to do this is the development of name of something that used to be called the gay movement. Pretty quickly, gay men realized that there are also homosexual women and that some people could be in between homosexual and heterosexual. So we find LGB movement, which was later expanded with trans and intersex people, to be later expanded to queer and plus. The idea here was to cover everyone in the community, so no one would feel left behind or forgotten or made invisible. And even despite the fact that we pretty quickly learn how to relate to LGBTIQ people in order to not leave anyone behind, we frequently fail in doing this with women. The issue with language is that not every language is as gender sensitive as English. English is very good in a way because it has most of the nouns that are gender neutral. That means that there's the same word for male manager, same word for female manager, and the group of male managers has the same name as a group of female managers, and also as a group of mixed managers. But many languages in the world, including languages like German, Spanish, and I believe most of the Slavic languages, are called gender inflected. That means that they have both different genders for different words and also different words for different roles with different genders. So for example, in Slovak, the table is male and the chair is female. And we have a different word for male manager and female manager. We have different word for male activist and female activist, and so on. English also has a couple of these words. For example, the male form is hero and female form is heroine. The group of male heroes is called heroes. Group of female heroes is called heroines. And group of heroines, regardless of how many women are there, it could be 5 women or 5 million women. If you add just a single male into the group, it becomes a group of heroes. And what I did here is actually grammatically correct. And this is the way you should be actually calling the group. It is called the generic masculine. It works. It says that if there is a diverse group for which there are male and female forms of the words, you should use the male form, and it is implied that you have in mind both men and women in this group. So let's look at an example how this works. Imagine that you are expanding your social media department and you open a job position for a social media hero. And you use generic masculine because that is the grammatical norm. And you imagine that everyone will understand that you mean both heroes and heroines. But what the research shows repeatedly is that when you use generic masculine, people will imagine you are talking predominantly about men. If you do this when you're advertising for a job position, you are essentially communicating to the world that you are looking for a man. And this can result into lower application rate from women, because they will also believe that you are looking for men instead. So it is a great way to recruit a lot of mediocre men and leave exceptional women behind. A common workaround for this is adding small brackets with letters M and F behind the generic masculine to indicate that you really mean both heroes and heroines. But once again, this does not work at all. And it gets even more complicated when you start referring to a group of people. So imagine you want to praise your social media department for the great work they did. So you say that our heroes did a great job, our social media heroes did a great job. And you imagine that you are referring to those 4 heroines and 1 hero in your social media department. But what will people outside hear is that you are praising a group of men because you are using generic masculine. And despite the fact that it is grammatically correct, people will simply imagine you are referring to males. And what happens here is that when you use generic masculine to describe this group, you are making the work of all the women invisible, and you are making the women invisible in your movement too. So this can be very damaging. Thankfully, there are quite easy options to deal with this. The first one is using the male form and adding a slash and the female suffix, like heroes/ins. It is easy, it is convenient, but as you can see, it is hard to read. Like, we're hiring heroes, ins, and whatever. So the preferred form is to use both forms, heroes and heroines, like we're hiring heroes and heroines. But if you're producing a longer text, this can expand the text to a whole new level and make it more complicated. So the preferred option is to avoid gendered nouns altogether and move to adjectives instead, like heroic groups. For example, we're recruiting to our heroic groups. It is rather easy, but it will take some time until you learn how to do this in order to make it neat and tidy. But it is definitely worth it because you will learn how to not make women in your movement invisible and how to reach out to all the target groups and set their expectations from your job opening correctly. When you succeed in that, you can move to the next step, which is recruitment process. This is essentially the gateway to your organization, and this is the place where a lot of biases are at play. Some of these can be conscious, and there will be people who will consciously try to make it harder for different social groups to get through the recruitment process. But most of these biases are unconscious, and it can make a lot of mess. And one nice tool to measure how messy this is based on using 2 sets of CVs, which are identical. And the only difference of these CVs is that one set is with a typically male name and the second one with a typically female name. And these CVs are sent out to HR specialists. And what was the result of the study like this in Slovakia recently was that the CVs with the female name were offered 15% lower wages than those with male name. And remember, those were identical CVs. And again, when the study used typically Roma names and typically white people names, the CVs with Roma name had 50% lower chances for being invited to the interview compared to the white names, just based on the name itself. So the best thing you can do to avoid something like this to happen is to make your recruitment process as anonymous as possible. You can, for example, choose one staff person to go through all the CVs, remove all the names or the gendered nouns and all the indicators of race, sexual orientation, or gender in order to get all the biases out of the way. Ania Pierzchała from Otwarte Klatki will be having a talk about this, so I recommend you watch that talk too. And when you get those people on board, your organization, you need to make sure that you create an environment in which they can fully focus on fighting for the animals and not deal with different kinds of bullshit and overcoming different obstacles. And one way to do this is usually called safe spaces or safer spaces, or you can call it anti-harassment policy. The whole idea is that you set up rules regarding what kind of behavior is welcome in your organization, what kind will not be tolerated, and clear instructions for people what should they do if they see some kind of this untolerated behavior. This policy can cover everything from the harshest things like violence and sexual harassment through using hateful and hurtful language like homophobic or transphobic language, up to more subtle behavior, like constantly interrupting women in discussion and trying to marginalize them. What's the point here is to make sure that people in your organization know that we should focus on productivity, and that no one will be making it harder for different social groups to focus on fighting for animals. When you succeed in creating an environment like this, you need to do the next step. And that means removing so-called glass ceilings. That means that even in a diverse organization, it can happen that it is hard for different social groups to rise to the top of the organization, get to the best paid positions, or the positions that are making decisions, like the board of your organization. And in the white man's design, the boards usually look like this. And if you have a board like this in a diverse organization, it does not only hurt or harm the groups that are underrepresented in this board, but it hurts the organization itself. Because what data shows is that the more diverse the boards are, both in professional backgrounds of different board members, but also in the sense of race, gender, sexual orientation, or disability, the better decisions they produce. The reason is that the more diverse crowd brings in more diverse perspectives, see more problems that could be hidden for you with a less diverse crowd, and they produce better solutions for these problems. So you should definitely try to make your board as diverse and as representative as possible, both of your organization, of your movement, and of the region in which you are working or operating. The next great area is about representation. And this covers everything from choosing people you quote on social media, the picture of people's or videos you use in your communication, the person who speaks for you to the media, the influencers and ambassadors you choose to represent your organization, up to events and speakers you choose there, the panelists you choose for your panels, and people you invite to your conferences. You should always try to make it as diverse and as representative of, again, your movement, your organization, and the region in which you work. And there is also a special area of choosing speakers, and that is avoiding people who have history of violent behavior, of sexual harassment, or ongoing controversies regarding maybe cases of hate speech, whether it is some homophobic, transphobic, or racist comments, and cases that were not properly resolved. Because when you invite people to speak for your organization, you're sending out a message. And it is a sort of value statement. It tells people who is welcome in your organization and who you are willing to throw aboard. And if you invite someone with a history of for example, violent or sexual harassment behavior, or unresolved hate speech or similar comments cases, you basically harm again the same group that was harmed by this person, and this will do damage both to these people and to your organization and to your reputation. So think twice before you invite people who have ongoing controversies like this or messy history like this guy on this picture. Also, beware of survivor bias. There will always be people from different social groups who will succeed on making it to the top, regardless of all the obstacles that will stand in their way, and they will simply fight through it. But don't mistake these exemptions with the rule. It's the same thing why you should not think that United States of America have solved their problem with racism because they used to have a black president. And it's the same, the fact that your organization has a female CEO does not necessarily mean that your organization provides the same opportunities to men and women, and that it is already inclusive. So instead of focusing on those who made it despite all the odds, focus on those who did not make it. The people who, for various reasons, were not able to join your organization, figure out on which obstacles they were stopped, and focus on how you can remove those obstacles instead. And also prepare for a small kind of backlash. Every time you make an impactful change, and when you change the rule of the game, you are essentially changing the power balance. And this often makes people angry. In this case, the most impacted people will be the white heterosexual men, especially those with conservative values, because you are essentially taking some privilege from them. You will be accused of being woke, of bringing politics into the movement, or even uprooting the foundations of Western society. And in a sense, you are actually doing that because you are replacing the white man's design and replacing it with a design which provides equal opportunities to all the other social groups. Thankfully, we are working in a very rational and data-driven movement, so it should not be hard for you to use the scientific data to show to these people that what you are actually doing is in the best interest of both the organization and the animals. And finally, the most important part and thing you have to do is to learn to listen to different perspectives of different people and integrate them into your movement design. This could be people that already made it to your organization, but also people who did not make it into your organization, and different advocacy groups that fight for their rights. Because these are the people who can help you design the organization in the best possible way. And these are the people who will be crucial in situations when you will fail. And you will inevitably fail at some point. The policies you will try to implement will blow into your face. And in order to repair that and avoid additional damage and improve your design, you need to talk to these people and find out how to do better next time and improve in the future. So to conclude my talk, I would like to use the popular proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We have a long way ahead of us, and even despite the fact that we are becoming stronger and more global every day, and there will be a lot of new global challenges. And in order to overcome them and become a strong and resilient global movement, we need to simply become more inclusive and more diverse in order to relate to a very diverse global community. So I wish you good luck in making your organization more inclusive and more diverse, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your talk, Martin. We now have time for some questions. So everyone in the audience, use your chance to ask Martin something right now. And while the questions are rolling in, then I would just start with a question of my own. So one thing what I'm thinking is that often we in animal advocacy are still working in societies that are largely patriarchal, right? And therefore, I'm thinking in order to get into discussion with these parts of society, should we adopt or should we present ourselves in a way that is more approachable for this part of society? So what I mean is, for example, should we have more patriarchal male voices in our movement, or should we ask our female participants to, I don't know, like man up and change the way they would like to present themselves? Do you have any thoughts about this?
This will depend strongly case by case on the country you are working and also in what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve in the campaign. But you should always segment your target groups and use different channels of communications towards different groups. So, for example, if you want to relate to conservative men, you would probably choose a different speaker for that campaign or for that marketing branch. And if you want to relate to younger people, you would again use a different ambassador or different face to speak for you. But in general, as an organization, if you want to build your image, again, this depends strongly on which country you operate, because there are countries where this can very easily blow in your face. In other countries, it can be the best way to proceed. It is very similar with targeting your alliances with the LGBTIQ people. It is something which could be a very great idea in Central or in Western Europe. But if you do something like this, for example, change your profile picture during the Pride Month with something with rainbow, you can get into a lot of trouble in countries like Russia or Belarus, and this could be like really life-threatening experience. So you really need to take into account how progressive your country actually at this point is, and what kinds of brand setting or brand building is something that is still the best way to proceed in your country without doing more harm than benefit.
Okay, thank you. So a question from the audience. So Gabriel firstly says, thank you for your presentation. Do you have any ideas on how to attract more men to the movement? The problem we have is that the vast majority of people applying to volunteer or work for us is women, and it seems that men are not interested as much in working for animals. Sorry if you have already answered, the stream cut off. Okay, but I think you didn't answer yet, so.
What was the end? Oh, okay, now I get it.
Should I repeat it?
Yeah, I think I understand it. I think getting more men into our movement will be still hard, because this is another symptom of the white man's design, where it is considered unmanly to care. Basically, it is considered to be unmanly to care for the weaker, care for the animals, and actually deal with things like food other than meat. So in order to do this and to get more people on board, we need to move forward with the society itself. And one thing we are doing in this matter is that we are changing the design of the white heterosexual man in our own organization. And this is something that will slowly spread to the rest of the society, because the times changes, the new organizations that grow up, even inside or outside our movement, are slowly moving the society other direction. So in the future, thanks to that, it will be easier for men to publicly care for animals and join movements like this. But there are still options for very specific campaigns that would be targeting men in the patriarchal narrative, and you simply need to frame the issues of caring for animals in a way that it will relate to people who value deeply the strength and maybe the conservative values, and actually to frame the taking care of animals as the manly issues. So these are options you have. And both can help you, but it's probably not going to change significantly the balance of women and men in this movement in the upcoming years that quickly.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So Joe would like to or asks, how would you suggest that we attract greater diversity to our movement when wider social injustices still need to be fought that may take priority to animals for minority groups?
Yes, there are different battles that might become more important to people, especially if they're directly impacted by them. But it does not matter. That doesn't mean that they cannot become our allies. In my experience, we can build alliances with different social groups fighting for different goals, and we can help each other either in designing our organization in both ways. Maybe for them how to include the animal rights into their design and how they do their work, and also they can help us how to design our work. And it does not necessarily mean that they will become the big group of volunteers, activists, or employees in our organization. The important part here is to become allies, especially with movements which we are in a similar phase of development as the animal rights movement, and are facing similar obstacles or are growing similarly fast. So there's a lot we can learn, we can exchange, but the important part is to make sure that we all know that we have a perspective alliances that we can form. And later, many of these people, if they solve their issues, then they can more focus on our issues. And in the times of crisis, we can help each other. So this does not necessarily mean that those people have to become part of our organization and rise to the top, but they have to know that they can do that, and there will be no obstacles, and that we are true allies to them.
Thank you very much. And with this also, I would like to thank you again, Martin, for your really good presentation and all the attendees. And we will post a link to the chat. It's a Zoom link where you can follow to have a networking session with Martin. It will start right now. So we will end this transmission and see you in the Zoom.
Oh, thank you, and see you later.
See you.